My talk is based on an old poem. Many of you know this poem or have heard about it, read it in school at one time, something. It's a poem by a woman by the name of Elizabeth Barrett Browning. And it starts off, "How do I love thee? Let me count the ways." And that's the title of my talk, "Let Me Count the Ways." She goes on to describe in this poem all the different ways in a very poetic and beautiful and romantic way of the ways that she loved her husband, Robert Browning. Let me give you a little background on these two people. I think this is quite a romantic love story. And it's also a very unusual and you would think, logic would tell you that these two should never have met or been together or anything. He was already a famous poet when he read some of her poetry, and it was poetry that he read that had been self-published by her father. Her father thought that he had a very talented daughter and that everyone else should read her poetry as well, and so he couldn't get anyone interested in publishing it, so he published it himself. Well, he was correct. She was a lovely, lovely poet, and she was accepted immediately in this first book of poetry, which was titled Poems. Robert Browning found out about these poems, and he read them, and he was so delighted and so captivated by them that he wrote a letter to her, telling her that he was inspired by her and that she should continue writing poetry, and that it was very lovely, and that he was inspired to write even more poetry himself, having read this by her. She wrote a letter back thanking him, and this was in April of some year, I can't remember exactly, maybe 1834, 1836, something like that. Well, here's the part that's just amazing. These two letters turned into, that summer, a total of over 600 letters shared between the two of them. Over 600 letters. Now I got to calculating this. That's a lot of letters in a short summer. Let's say that the summer extends into about 130, 120, 130 days. That means that you'd have to write a letter morning, noon, and night in every one of these days, and receive a letter morning, noon, and night for every one of these days, to take up 3 months. Well, let's say that they're counting summer as 4 months. That's still morning, noon, and night for all that time to write letters. Can you imagine? In those days, in the 1800s, there wasn't a lot of postal service. There was no internet. They weren't writing to one another in that way. That meant that they would have to write a letter, post it, write another letter, and then receive one. Write another letter, post it, and receive one. Most likely what happened is that after this got going, it was like 3 at a time. 3 at a time going, 3 at a time like that. Or maybe it was 15 all at once, or whatever it was, but they were writing about, this is what happened to me in the morning, this is what happened in the evening, this is what happened to me right before I went to bed. Sounds like Facebook, doesn't it? Pictures of food, and this is what I'm eating right now, that sort of thing. Sounds like that. But it must have been amazing. And the two of them started out as colleagues, or more like he was her mentor. And it started that way, and it developed and it developed. Here's the part that's very strange about all this. Her father was the one who was so inspired by her writing, and when she started developing a relationship with this poet, Robert Browning, he was against it. The two of them eventually met and eloped, and he never spoke to his daughter again because he didn't approve of her marrying a poet. Strange, isn't it? Time passed, and in 1850 she released, I think, her third or fourth volume of poetry. And by this time they were living together in Italy. This is where they made their home. And she wrote this 44 sonnet tome of poetry, and she called it Sonnets from the Portuguese. Number 43. The next to the last sonnet is the one that is remembered the most. And the first line of that is known worldwide. How do I love thee? Let me count the ways. Not everyone knows the rest of the poem, but they know that much of it. Almost everyone knows that much of it or has heard it. The end of the poem, after she's gone through all the breadth and depth and everything of her soul and her heart and her mind, she finally gets to the last part, and this is the part that interested me into wanting to put together this talk. She says, the only way, and I'm paraphrasing now, of course, she says, the only way this could get any better is for me to be dead, to experience death. The only way that I could ever love you more is in death. Wow. I see from the looks on your face that it strikes you the same way that it struck me. Sort of a, ooh, huh? Wow. So I thought about this. I let it go over and over again in my mind. Usually we hear the word death in the marriage vows, time of love, once again, in pledging your love, until death do us part. And she's saying, no, after death it just gets better. Why would she say such a thing? I pondered it, and here's what came to me. Because then there is nothing between us and spirit. There's nothing. Nothing between us and spirit. You know, we have heard that there is all sorts of loves, and she tries to mention as much as she can in her poem. Let her count the ways. Let you count your ways. Let me count my ways. What comes of it? A limited idea of love because we're human. That's what she's expressing when she says, it'll only get better after death, because then I'll no longer be human. Human love, in every respect, however much we aspire to it, is always limited and always has something there that keeps it from being fully expressed. You know, we talk about the love of God, and we say that love is unconditional. But the love of humans is always conditional, no matter how much we aspire to being fully in love or fully loving. It's always got some sort of condition. Think about this. Think about your own children, if you have children, or think about something in your life. Think about yourself, if you don't have children. All of us say to ourselves, or to our child, you know, I love it when you are good. I just love it when you express yourself that way. I love your smile. Smile more often. I love your laugh. Laugh more often. What we're saying to that person is not just that I love your smile, it's I don't love your frown. I don't love when you're not laughing. I don't love. We put a limitation upon it of some kind, even if we don't mean to. Even if we're trying to express as much as we can to the other person how much we love them. We can say that to ourselves. I love myself the way I am, but still, I want to grow. We say these things knowing that there is a limitation and a condition that we place upon it, no matter how, because that's just the way life is. How can we ever get to that place of unconditional love? We talk about it. We talk about trying to express unconditional love. We aspire towards this unconditional love. That's a tough one. Can you think of someone in this world right now? Just conjure up someone in this world right now that you really have a hard time loving. For some of us, that's really not that difficult, is it? Now imagine how God is doing with that same person. There are those who tell you God can't love, and then you fill in the blank. God can't love sinners. God can't love homosexuals. God can't love murderers. God can't love. Wow. That's not my expression of what God is. That's not my understanding. God is loving them as well. Why? Because God is those people. I had a teacher one time say this to me, and it was difficult at first, a spiritual teacher, and it was hard for me to grasp when she first said it. She said, you know, the true name of Satan is God. Boom. I finally started getting what that means. There is no division. There is no separation. Only in our minds. Only in our finite human minds. That being the case, there is no other. There is no other. Only one. Once we grasp that idea and really hang on to it, it'll escape us from time to time. And we'll start seeing ourselves doing this separating and dividing and so forth. When we do this, it is difficult and almost impossible for us to live in that kingdom of love. To live there, to be there, to constantly stay there. But you know the wonderful good news about it is, even though we leave, we can come back. We can come right back to that place. Now, just like Elizabeth Barrett Browning stated, it may take a sense of no longer being alive in the physical for us to achieve this oneness. It may take that. But even that is an obstacle that can be overcome. This is stated to us directly by Jesus. Behold, I have overcome the world. I've overcome it all. So how do you love? How do you love? How you doing with that? How's that working for you, the loving thing? Can you love as closely as you can come to unconditionally? Can you catch yourself? Can you examine what you're doing inside and say, that's not loving. I've done it again. I'm outside of love. Can I bring myself back in? Can I draw all things to me once again? Can I recreate? Can I recreate once again that sense of oneness? We can, even if only for a fraction of an instant, because the more we do it, the easier it gets. How do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, practice, practice. How do you get to this loving state? Practice, practice, practice. Become aware when you're out of it. Do no condemnation of self. And bring yourself back into it. Oops, I'm doing it again. Bring yourself back into it. You know, there's a type of meditation. It's done with the eyes open, facing directly towards a wall or yourself or anything else. And the idea is to be completely blank. And the moment a thought occurs in your mind, you say to yourself, thinking, and return once again to that deeper state. Thinking. We must say that to ourselves as well. Except we would say to ourselves, loving, and return to that loving state. Loving, once again, remembering, not judging, loving, and return to that state of love once again. How do I love thee? Let me count the ways. There is but one way. Unconditionally. That is the goal to strive for. Unconditional love. Pure love. Love that no longer has any other to it. It's fully embracing all, including self. It isn't always the easiest thing in the world to do, but then if it were easy, we wouldn't strive to achieve it at all. Actually, it is easy in some ways. Just simply let the rest of the stuff go. Can we do it? Occasionally. But eventually we'll all reach that state in our minds. We'll reach that state in our hearts where we fully are present to the love of God, that love of unconditioned expression. That's my dream. God bless.